When I'm in Austin, sometimes if I reach too far, my hands disappear. My hands have sort of a point where they just run out. They just sort of disappear into the Austin air. Does that happen to you guys?
Very weird. This episode of The Modern Rogue brought to you by NordVPN. Head on over to nordvpn.com/rogue. Spell it right, R-O-G-U-E. Sign up for 2 years, get a massive discount, and 4 months free of the service. Like if you're in jail, you don't suddenly get to escape for 4 months. Your Honor. For some reason, the defendant is slamming the gavel.
Your Honor, this is my defendant's gavel.
This is a kangaroo court. For everybody who doesn't know at home, Jordan Breeding, one of our most prolific writers at themodernrogue.com. What are we talking about today?
Sort of the weird origins behind some children's play games, as I like to call them.
Sorry was originally titled Up Yours, the game.
Can you think of a sexier game than Twister?
I think of all those Spring Break '93 shirts like Naked Twister or Strip Chess Boxing.
Well, see, that's the thing, right? Like, sexiness is just built into Twister, and it always has been, and I won't hear otherwise. But the way that it was invented was for children, actually. Basically, this guy was supposed to sell shoes, specifically back-to-school shoes, and so he decided to make a polka-dotted mat to put shoes on, and he took it to a kid's school. And after he got there, was like, hey, I bet we could step on these.
Hold on, just real quick, so I have all the facts in my mind. We all know that Twister is synonymous with sexy. We all know that you don't want to mix your sexy with children. And the guy's a shoe salesman, and the one thing I know about Twister is that you must take off your shoes to play the game.
Yeah, it was a little convoluted.
This is mid-20th century, like 1950s or so?
I believe so, yeah. It's not particularly long ago. And at the time, when he invented it, sort of ad hoc in the middle of this shoe sale, he called it King Tootsie. No, wait, King Footsie. Hold on. King Footsie.
One of those was a stripper, the other is a game.
It's up to you to decide which. They had so much fun playing it, he was like, I got a hit. This King Footsie is gonna rip across the nation. Everybody's gonna be footsying it up with my game.
Yeah, okay.
But he took it to Milton Bradley, he took it to a bunch of these other board game companies, and they're like, oh, we don't want your filthy King Footsie.
I always thought Milton Bradley were two different people, but I am in love with the idea that Milton Bradley's one guy smoking a cigar. He's like, let me tell you about your King Footsie, kid. It's garbage. Nobody will care. Ashes in his eyes.
Yeah, it's smut. We don't do smut. Well, he's like, well, King Footsie didn't work, so he came back with the exact same thing. He said, it's called pretzel. And they still said no. And then he came back and he said, now it's called Twister. And that time they were like, fine. So Milton Bradley bought.
Save it for the Parker Brothers. Get out of here. Hasbro, more like has been. Get out.
So eventually they buy it, and they create the game. They ship it, and frickin' nobody buys it. Sears won't even put it on their shelves because they called it sex in a box. And many at Milton Bradley were like questioning their moral fortitude. They're like, are we working for a porn company now? I was just trying to sell, Monopoly. Or did they do Monopoly? Whatever. Any of our other much cleaner board games.
This is worse than that time that we made the game that was supposed to prove capitalism is bogus, and it became more popular than ever because capitalism.
Yeah, right. They couldn't sell it. Nobody wanted it. Like, stores legitimately said, no, you can't put your porn game, on our pristine shelves. And so they hired a PR marketing firm. Actually, before I even tell you what they did, let me take you to this interesting moment because I think it's analogous in some ways. Have you seen the live action version of Alita Battle Angel?
No. I only know that it's the Uncanny Valley made into meth.
Yeah, pretty much. And that's actually what's interesting about it. So when they first made the movie, the main character, Alita, has has these big ass freaky eyes, right?
Big ass freaky eyes.
And they're sitting there watching the early cuts, and they're like, God, those are some big ass freaky eyes. I don't know, man. It's people are gonna be freaked out. And James Cameron, of all people, comes in, and I wish he had an interesting voice that I could mimic. And they're like, James Cameron.
I'll lend you mine. It's me, Milton Bradley.
Milton Bradley came back, and he's like, hey, you think the eyes are too big? Make them 30% bigger.
Yeah.
And they were like, well, that's crazy. And then they did it, and they were like, oh, you're right. You just gotta lean into the weirdness. What the PR firm said is, hey, why don't we just lean into how sexy this Twister is? God, let's take her back all the way to her King Footsie roots. They got Eva Gabor, at the time, a sex symbol in America. They put her on Johnny Carson, and she and Johnny Carson played, and it was the sexiest thing that had ever happened.
And she was literally on Johnny Carson, I assume.
I believe so. And after that, sales just freaking skyrocketed. They were like, oh, it's sex in a box? Great. You know, the way to get over your moral inhibitions is to throw money at it.
I feel like there has to be more examples of this where it's like, you know what? I feel like anything more I say will only cause trouble. What else you got?
Let's just say the segue here is all of these board games are ways marketed towards Americans in particular, because Americans have sometimes different attitudes than the rest of the world.
I swear to God, at some point this is going to be a Jeopardy sketch, and you're like, the category is, oh, those Americans, they have different ways to market things because Americans all over the world, am I right?
I just say enough words until eventually we arrive at the next point, which is, in the 1800s, the Germans invented a board game called Hoppity.
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 It was pretty fun. People liked it fine.
Give me a hint. What year is this in Germany? Because it kind of matters.
It's the 1800s. It's not Hoppity from one European conquested country to another.
Oh my God. Who invented Risk?
Probably the German. Well, it feels French, right? Like
No.
it seems like Napoleonic based.
Real quick, describe the game for me. Why was the hopping a thing?
The game, there are pegs and you jump over the peg. Well, you hop really. If I had to get technical. They changed the name to Helma, and it sold pretty well in the UK and other non-German places that were less thrilled about Hoppity, I guess.
Is this similar to like at the Cracker Barrel, you do the IQ game where you jump over a thing and you take
It's
out a
actually
peg?
very similar to that, except you do not lose pieces. Now we got to sell it to Americans, right? It's the 1920s again. Alcohol's illegal. They got to have something to do. What they decided was Americans don't care about Hoppity. They don't care about Europe. What they do care about is the mystical allure of the Far East. So what they did was they took this game and they called it Chinese checkers, and they made all the marketing around it like, ooh, like we imported this game in from some crazy, foreign Far East, and it's, they play it over there while they do things that Americans have never even dreamt of doing. And that's what it took, and it sold like freaking crazy. Like it was a brilliant move.
Historically, what I learned in college is that the Chinese were fairly protectionist, and they enjoyed keeping their secrets. Gunpowder gets invented and the printing press is invented, and it takes a while for Europeans to a little bit slow on the uptake here. But in the early 20th century, there was a bit of a hysteria in the magic world where anything foreign or exotic really had this air of, as you put, mysticism to it. There was a famous English person who pretended day and night like a pro wrestler, like he was from China, named Chungling Su, and only upon his death performing the infamous bullet catch was it revealed, nope, this is a white dude who never spoke Chinese, and all of his Chinese characters are nonsense. So this would be the right time for all of this.
Even now, 100 years later, I still only notice Chinese checkers. Like that's still what we call it and what it is, even though it's not.
I wonder if there is any kind of backlash against. You know what? I don't wonder, and I don't want to touch this issue with the 10-foot pole. Do we have another story?
We do. We have a happier one. So, have you heard of polio?
What's funny is I spent exactly 1.5 seconds trying to figure out, what would the game of polio look like? Did it become pole vaulting? No, he's talking about polio.
Yep. It's just the disease, and I assume it's not it's not a uniquely American thing, right? But I just hear about it from an American context. It doesn't matter. In the 40s, like 1948, a school teacher got polio, hanging out in the hospital, and is looking at all the, as people were wont to do back then. You know, you get polio, you go hang out at the hospital.
Hey, anybody want to play a hoppity? Maybe pretzel?
Oh no, King Footsie not going so great. But actually, that's the point. So she's sitting there in her hospital bed, looking at all the sad children with polio who are bored out of their minds because Xbox is still really far away. We'd already had the Salem tomato trials. There's really nothing for them to do. So she said, I need to make essentially a game so easy that even if you're stricken with polio, you could have a lot of fun playing it. So she invents Candyland.
Let me get this straight. Candyland was intentionally made to be boring and easy?
Well, I mean, obviously not specifically boring, but the idea is that the rules had to be simple enough that any kid could pretty much grasp it right away. There's not a lot of like rolling dice and having to add that up. It's just you flip, it says red, I move to red, or has like a big ass chocolate cookie, I move to the big ass chocolate cookie.
But be careful of the cherry pitfalls.
It's just intentionally made to be simple, and there's not a lot of complex strategy, and there's not a lot of fine motor skills necessary. And so she made it, and it was great for the kids in that hospital, and she eventually sold it. But then, a couple years later, polio got even more popular among the children. And it sort of became sort of this like proto-COVID scenario where people, like, they kept their kids inside. Like, nobody knew what was going on.
They had to stay home.
They had to stay home, and so, let's play some Candyland. So Candyland became popular. The kids were bringing it back from the hospitals.
Well, and Candyland is perfect because it's one of the few games that, let's say you have two kids, you could make them play against each other because the rules are so simple. You don't have to, it's not like Magic the Gathering where you have to explain, well, no, if you tap first, then that activates this spell.
Right. I do think she was in the hospital and she's like, guys, I got this idea called Magic the Gathering, but all the kids were having trouble because of all of their emaciated limbs.
Yeah, they're polio. Yeah. I'll tell you what, I'm just gonna pitch this. We can all share the idea. Can we make Candyland the Gathering?
Ooh!
All right, Jordan, we know you've written so many articles at themodernrogue.com. Where else can we see more of your stuff?
I've got a YouTube channel. It's called Dr. Jordan Breeding because I am a doctor, maybe. And also I've got a Twitter, same name. I got SEO, so if you just type in Jordan Breeding. There's a developer named Jordan Breeding, but he died in 2015. But slowly, my SEO is starting to push him out of the search rankings. So,
Spellicus, go back, Homicus.
He turned into a phone.
Oh, Bryce, I had a sneaky moment. I was in trouble.
Uh-oh, what'd you do?
What do you do? What is the first thing you do when you go to a hacker convention?
Oh, I take out all my credit cards, and I write down all of the numbers.
Okay.
And I announce them out loud.
Okay.
And then I let everyone know my bank balance, PIN, and my mother's maiden name.
Okay. What if you instead made a habit of turning off your Wi-Fi, but here's the sneaky thing. I'm on iOS. That Wi-Fi thing, it's only for 24 hours. After 24 hours, it says, well, I don't know, is there any Wi-Fi around available? And of course, at a hacker convention, that's when they're gonna get you. But not if you always have the mobile app of NordVPN turned on. Then you have everything encrypted. Nobody can tell what website you're going to. Nobody can tell what you're saying. Look, we know you're not doing anything naughty. All I was doing was selling lockpicks. It sounds kind of naughty when you say it out loud. All I was doing was selling marked decks of cards. No. All I was doing was selling a pen that could turn into a weapon. No. The details don't matter. The important part is that you're not doing anything wrong, but you do deserve your own privacy. And you need the comfort, the peace of mind that comes from knowing that you have that end-to-end encryption. You need NordVPN. Head on over to nordvpn.com/rogue. Spell it right, R-O-G-U-E. Sign up for 2 years, get a huge discount, and I'll get you 4 months free.
Whoa.
Yeah, that's right. I got some pull.
Okay.
Modern Rogue is supported in part by viewers like you at patreon.com/modernrogue. In the description, you can find all of our credits and additional ways to support the show.
Have you ever watched Memento forwards?
No, is that an option? Like, can you do that?
Man, must have been 15, 20 years ago. I used Premiere to cut it to go forward.
Oh, okay.
Boy, is there
Well,
no story there. It's like, just, you're a jerk, you're a jerk, you're a jerk, what is this?
I don't doubt it, but it is a fascinating movie the way that it is, so I'll leave it alone.